They laughed my $750,000 buyout right out of the dining room, thinking they had put their prodigal daughter in her place. They didn't realize they'd just sold their legacy to my anonymous holding company for $5.2 million. The rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Oakbrook estate, but inside the dining room, the temperature felt entirely frozen. Harper Hayes sat at the far end of the sprawling mahogany table, her untouched glass of Cabernet reflecting the low amber light of the chandelier. For 80 years, Hayes Global Freight had been the pride of the family, a mid-sized logistics empire built by her grandfather, sustained by her father, Gregory, and currently being driven directly into the ground by her older brother, Cameron. Harper was the anomaly in the Hayes bloodline. While Cameron had been groomed from birth to take over the executive suite, gifted with a corner office and an inflated salary the moment he graduated, Harper had been offered a mid-level marketing role. She had declined, packed her bags at 22, and moved to Seattle. Over the next decade, she quietly built Aegis Supply Solutions, a supply chain analytics firm that automated the very inefficiencies her family's company stubbornly ignored. She had sold her first startup for a quiet, undisclosed fortune and now ran a private equity firm, Vanguard Ridge Capital. But to Gregory and Cameron, she was still just the rebellious daughter playing with startup money. "I'm just saying," Cameron announced, leaning back in his chair and swirling his scotch. "The fourth quarter is always a bloodbath. The fuel surcharges are eating into our margins, but we've secured the loan from Chase. We just need to weather the storm." Harper watched her brother's smug expression. She knew for a fact that Chase hadn't secured the loan. The commercial lending division had quietly flagged Hayes Global Freight as a massive liability 3 weeks ago. Cameron was lying to their father's face, masking the sheer panic of a company bleeding $50,000 a day. Chase pulled out. "Cameron," Harper said quietly. The clinking of silverware stopped. Gregory looked up from his steak, his heavy brows furrowed in immediate irritation. "Excuse me?" "Chase Bank," Harper repeated, her voice calm and measured. "They pulled the term sheet on Tuesday. Your debt-to-income ratio is in the red, and you lost the Oakhaven retail contract last month because your tracking software is 20 years out of date. You aren't weathering a storm, you are actively sinking." Cameron's face flushed a deep, ugly crimson. "How the hell do you know about Oakhaven? That's confidential company business." "The industry is small, Cam, and incompetence is loud," Harper replied, reaching down to the leather briefcase by her feet. She pulled out a crisp manila folder and slid it down the polished wood toward her father. Gregory didn't touch it. He glared at it as if it were a bomb. "What is this, Harper?" "It's a lifeline," she said. "I've run the numbers. You have about 6 weeks of operating capital left before you start missing payroll. I am offering an immediate cash injection of $750,000. It covers the supply chain upgrades you desperately need, keeps the trucks running, and buys you time to restructure." Cameron let out a sharp, mocking laugh. $750,000? From you? What, did you empty your little tech bro retirement fund? "The money is liquid, and it can be in the company account by Monday morning," Harper continued, ignoring her brother and locking eyes with her father. "But it comes with terms. I want a 15% equity stake, a seat on the advisory board, and veto power over operational software expenditures. Cameron steps back from tech acquisitions, and I oversee the modernization." For a long, suffocating moment, the dining room was dead silent. The only sound was the rain beating against the glass. Then, Gregory stood up. He was a tall, imposing man who had spent his life giving orders, and the idea of his daughter dictating terms to him in his own home was a bridge too far. "You come into my house," Gregory began, his voice dangerously low, "and you have the audacity to insult your brother, insult the legacy of this family, and demand a seat at a table you abandoned a decade ago?" "I abandoned a sinking ship, Dad. Now I'm throwing you a raft." "We don't need your charity," Cameron yelled, standing up to join his father. "We are an $80 million logistics firm. We have assets, we have trucks, we have real estate. You think you can swoop in here with $750,000 and play savior? Keep your startup pennies." Gregory picked up the manila folder. He didn't even open it. He tore the heavy stock paper in half, then in half again, and dropped the shredded pieces onto his plate, right on top of his half-eaten steak. "Hayes Global is a family business," Gregory said, his eyes cold. And you made it very clear you weren't interested in this family. The door is behind you." Harper didn't flinch. She had expected the pride, but the sheer, blinding arrogance was breathtaking. She picked up her coat, stood up from the table, and looked at the two men who were willing to bankrupt their heritage just to avoid admitting she was right. "When the creditors call, Cameron," Harper said softly, walking toward the entryway, "make sure you tell them about your pride. I hear it pays the bills." She walked out into the cold Chicago night, knowing exactly what she had to do next. The $750,000 offer had been her final attempt at being a daughter. From now on, she was going to be an investor. 3 months later, the situation at Hayes Global Freight had transitioned from a slow bleed to a total arterial rupture. Harper sat in her glass-walled office at Vanguard Ridge Capital, overlooking the bustling streets of downtown Chicago. On her desk sat a comprehensive dossier on her family's company. It was worse than she had predicted. Cameron's desperate attempts to secure alternative funding had led him to predatory mezzanine lenders. The company had leveraged its headquarters in the South Loop just to make payroll in November. Now, February was approaching, and they were staring down the barrel of a $1.2 million balloon payment they absolutely could not meet. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. William Thatcher walked in. William was a senior partner at Thatcher and Wright LLP, a man whose tailored suits and silver hair commanded immediate respect in any boardroom. He was sharp, ruthless, and entirely on Harper's payroll. "They took the bait," William said, taking a seat across from her and opening his iPad. "Cameron Hayes has officially authorized his broker to seek private equity rescue. They are asking for $5 million to consolidate their debts and modernize. It's a Hail Mary." Harper smiled thinly. "He's desperate. He's looking for dumb money. Someone who will write a check and let him keep playing CEO." "Exactly," William agreed. "I've established contact under the umbrella of Apex Holdings, one of Vanguard's blind shell corporations. As far as Cameron and your father are concerned, I am representing a syndicate of East Coast investors who know nothing about logistics but want to park cash in hard assets. I pitched them a $5.2 million convertible debt note." "Walk me through the covenants, William. I want to make sure the noose is tight." William adjusted his glasses. "It's a standard debt-to-equity swap, but with highly aggressive triggers. We loan them the $5.2 million at an 8% interest rate. On paper, they retain full voting control of the company. However, hidden in the operational covenants is a performance threshold. If Hayes Global's quarterly profit margins drop below 4% for 2 consecutive quarters, or if they default on a single monthly interest payment, the note automatically converts." "Converts to what?" Harper asked, though she already knew the answer. She just wanted to hear it out loud. 60% super voting equity," William said, a predatory glint in his eye. "We instantly become the majority shareholders. We gain the power to liquidate assets, restructure the board, and fire the C-suite with zero severance. We will own them." "And Cameron thinks this is a good deal?" "Cameron thinks he's a genius," William scoffed. "He's so blinded by the $5.2 million cash injection that he had his in-house counsel gloss right over the operational covenants. He assumes they'll hit the profit margins easily once the debt is consolidated. He has no idea that the logistics market is about to see a massive spike in diesel costs next month. They won't hit those margins." "Let's finalize it," Harper commanded. "But William, I want you to make Cameron sweat during the signing. Let him think he negotiated you down. Make him feel powerful." 2 days later, in a sterile conference room at Thatcher and Wright LLP on LaSalle Street, the trap was sprung. Gregory and Cameron sat on one side of the expansive glass table. Both men looked visibly aged. Gregory's posture was stiff, a man holding on to the last shreds of his dignity. Cameron tried to exude confidence, wearing a brand-new Rolex he had clearly bought on credit to look the part of a successful executive. Across from them sat William Thatcher, playing the role of the aloof proxy to perfection. "My clients are taking a significant risk here, Mr. Hayes," William said smoothly, tapping a silver pen against the finalized contract. $52 million in unsecured convertible debt is not a small favor. They are trusting that your operational leadership can turn this ship around. "And we will," Cameron said, leaning forward aggressively. "With this capital, we automate the fleets, buy out the lease on our Southside warehouse, and double our margins by Q3. Your clients are going to get a very handsome return. Gregory stared at the paperwork. And your investors, they have no desire to interfere with daily operations? Hayes Global has been family-run since 1946. My clients are strictly financial. William lied flawlessly. They are entirely anonymous and prefer to remain in the shadows. As long as you meet the quarterly targets outlined in Section 4B, you will never even hear from them. Cameron didn't even flip to Section 4B. He had already seen the zeros on the wire transfer agreement. He picked up his pen and signed his name with a flourish. Gregory hesitated for a fraction of a second, a flicker of intuition warning him that things were too easy, before finally adding his signature next to his son's. It was done. William stood up, offering a firm handshake. Gentlemen, a pleasure doing business. 10 minutes later, as Cameron and Gregory were taking the elevator down to the lobby, celebrating the fact that they had saved the company without having to grovel to Harper, William sent a single text message to his boss. The ink is dry. The wire is processing. You own the debt. Sitting miles away in her penthouse, Harper looked at her phone. She didn't smile. She just opened her laptop, pulled up the financial projections for Hayes Global Freight, and set a calendar reminder for exactly 6 months from today. That was the day they would miss their first margin target. That was the day the trap would snap shut. 6 months evaporated like water on a hot griddle. Summer descended upon Chicago, with a suffocating, oppressive humidity. But inside the executive suite of Hayes Global Freight, the atmosphere was bone-chillingly cold. Cameron Hayes stared blankly at the dual monitors on his mahogany desk, his bloodshot eyes tracing the jagged, terrifying downward trajectory of their quarterly profit margins. William Thatcher's hidden prediction had been surgically precise. A sudden geopolitical crisis in late April had sent global diesel prices skyrocketing by an unprecedented 22%. Instead of using the $5.2 million cash injection to aggressively automate the routing software and mathematically hedge their fuel costs, Cameron had impulsively purchased a fleet of 12 brand-new Peterbilt rigs. It was a sheer vanity play, a desperate, foolish attempt to project strength, dominance, and prosperity to their increasingly skeptical competitors. But shiny new trucks did absolutely nothing when exhausted dispatchers were still actively using localized spreadsheets to route drivers through crippling urban traffic. By the absolute end of the second quarter, Hayes Global's profit margin had flatlined at a miserable, unsustainable 1.8%. They had missed the strict 4% covenant threshold for the very first time. Pure panic had set in across the accounting department, but Cameron had confidently convinced his aging father it was merely a minor macroeconomic blip. Now, the third quarter was violently closing in 48 hours, and the internal numbers were significantly worse. The operating margin sat at a catastrophic 1.2%. Worse still, the company's cash reserves were entirely, undeniably depleted. The rapidly ballooning operational costs meant they were acutely short on the mandatory monthly interest payment to Apex Holdings by exactly $84,000. Cameron rubbed his aching temples, a dull, agonizing ache throbbing heavily behind his eyes. The sleek phone on his desk suddenly rang, the sharp, piercing sound making him physically flinch. It was the direct private line. He hesitated deeply, his trembling hand hovering nervously over the black receiver, dark dread pooling heavily in his stomach. He frantically snatched it up, desperately hoping it was their corporate broker with miraculous news of an emergency bridge loan. Instead, the polished, unyielding, terrifyingly calm voice of William Thatcher filled his ear. "Good afternoon, Mr. Hayes," Thatcher said, his smooth tone completely devoid of any professional pleasantry. "I am formally calling on behalf of Apex Holdings regarding the Q3 performance metrics and the outstanding interest payment due precisely at midnight." Cameron swallowed hard, desperately trying to keep his shaky voice somewhat steady. "William, listen to me. We just need a standard 30-day extension on the interest payment. The new fuel surcharges are aggressively hitting our corporate clients next month, and the revenue stream will completely balance out. As for the margins, it's a temporary industry-wide slump. You absolutely cannot penalize us for uncontrollable macroeconomic factors." Thatcher's heavy sigh was perfectly, meticulously calculated, a deliberate sound of profound corporate disappointment. "Mr. Hayes, my sophisticated clients are absolutely not in the charitable business of granting extensions, nor do they care whatsoever about your macroeconomic factors. They care exclusively about the legally binding covenants you and your father willingly signed. You have officially failed to meet the 4% margin threshold for 2 consecutive quarters, and you are undeniably about to default on your interest payment. Cameron gripped the sharp edge of his desk. It's a temporary liquidity crunch. Just give us until Friday. The contract is entirely, legally unambiguous, Thatcher replied coldly. At 12:01 a.m. tomorrow, the default mechanism legally triggers. The debt automatically converts. Apex Holdings will immediately own 60%. You cannot do this, Cameron shouted, his fragile composure completely shattering. We are an $80 million logistics company. You cannot just steal it for $5 million. Thatcher's voice dropped a full octave, turning razor sharp. We aren't stealing anything. We are simply executing the precise terms you eagerly agreed to. Tomorrow morning at exactly 9 o'clock, authorized representatives from Apex Holdings will personally arrive at your headquarters to formally execute the equity transfer and assume total operational control. I strongly suggest you and your father be present in the boardroom. Have a reasonably good evening, Mr. Hayes. The secure line went completely dead, leaving a stunned Cameron listening to the hollow dial tone. Cameron sat entirely frozen, the crushing reality of the devastating situation violently knocking the breath out of him. He had lost it. He had completely lost his grandfather's legendary legacy. He stood up slowly, his shaking legs feeling like solid lead, and walked silently down the carpeted hall to his father's sprawling office. Gregory Hayes was quietly reviewing a massive stack of unpaid vendor bills, his gold reading glasses perched delicately on his nose. When he looked up and saw his son's pale, trembling, terrified face, the expensive fountain pen slipped right from his fingers. Cameron, what exactly is it? Cameron could not even meet his father's searching eyes. Dad, Apex Holdings just called. The profit margins, the interest payment. We officially missed them. They're taking the company. Gregory's wrinkled face completely drained of color. The typically imposing patriarch suddenly seemed to violently shrink into his massive leather chair. What do you mean? They're taking the company? We legally have voting control. Not anymore, Cameron whispered, his strained voice painfully cracking. The financial default legally triggers the aggressive debt-to-equity swap. They instantly get 60% supervoting shares. They're coming here tomorrow morning to forcibly take over. Gregory stood up quickly, violently knocking his heavy chair backward against the wall. Call the lawyers right now. Call the banks. We will relentlessly fight this in federal court. There is absolutely no fight, Dad. We eagerly signed it. Their ruthless lawyer thoroughly made sure it was completely ironclad. We blindly handed them the master keys, and they're coming tomorrow to confidently collect. That night, a severe, rolling thunderstorm aggressively battered the greater Chicago area, perfectly mirroring the sheer internal chaos consuming the Hayes household. Gregory frantically spent 6 hours, desperately calling every single financial contact, wealthy friend, and independent lender he knew, practically begging for a sudden $5 million miracle to successfully buy out the predatory debt. Every single call ended in polite, uncomfortable rejection. Hayes Global was officially viewed as a toxic, sinking ship. No one in their right mind was willing to throw good money into a blazing corporate inferno. By 3 a.m, Gregory finally collapsed onto his living room sofa, staring blankly at the dark ceiling, the bitter, agonizing taste of absolute defeat heavily coating his dry mouth. The morning of the hostile takeover arrived with a bleak, oppressive, heavy gray overcast. At precisely 8:45, Gregory and Cameron Hayes sat silently in the expansive glass-walled boardroom of Hayes Global Freight. The long, polished mahogany table, which had proudly seen decades of lucrative deals and massive family triumphs, now felt exactly like an executioner's cold block. Neither man had slept a single wink. Cameron nervously bounced his right leg, his expensive suit looking oddly wrinkled and severely disheveled. Gregory simply stared out the massive window at the busy highway, completely lost in a dark ocean of profound regret. At exactly 8:55, the heavy boardroom doors swung confidently open. William Thatcher strolled in, looking impeccably sharp in a bespoke navy suit. He was closely followed by 2 imposing corporate security guards and a stern female paralegal, firmly carrying a thick stack of finalized legal documents. "Good morning, gentlemen," Thatcher said smoothly, casually unbuttoning his tailored jacket and taking a seat directly across from the two devastated men. He gestured for the paralegal to aggressively distribute the thick files. These are the finalized equity transfer documents, officially confirming the legal conversion of the $5.2 million debt note into exactly 60% supervoting equity, formerly assigned to Apex Holdings. Gregory glared venomously at the silver-haired lawyer. You absolutely set us up, Thatcher. You completely knew we wouldn't realistically hit those aggressive margin targets with the sudden fuel spikes. This was a predatory, calculated ambush from the very beginning. Thatcher merely offered a thin, completely unbothered smile. Mr. Hayes, I simply drafted a binding legal contract based entirely on the financial projections your own son confidently provided. If you firmly believed your company was fundamentally incapable of basic profitability, you should never have signed the loan. Cameron slammed his fist aggressively on the table. Where is your boss? Where are the invisible cowards from Apex Holdings? If they are going to physically steal my company, they should at least have the basic human decency to look me in the eye when they completely ruin my life. Thatcher calmly checked his gold wristwatch. The primary investor and majority shareholder of Apex Holdings is arriving precisely now. Right on cue, the heavy glass boardroom doors smoothly opened once more. The loud, rhythmic clicking of designer heels sharply echoed across the hardwood floor. Gregory and Cameron simultaneously turned their heads, their angry expressions instantly freezing into masks of absolute, paralyzing shock. Harper Hayes walked confidently into the room. She wore a razor-sharp, immaculate charcoal power suit, her hair pulled back into a severe, elegant style. She carried the exact same leather briefcase she had brought to the disastrous family dinner nearly 9 months prior. Her face was a perfect, unreadable mask of absolute corporate detachment. She didn't look like a prodigal daughter. She looked exactly like an apex predator who had successfully cornered her bleeding prey. Cameron's jaw practically hit the floor. Harper? What the absolute hell are you doing here? Harper smoothly walked directly to the absolute head of the table, the very seat that had aggressively belonged to her father for 40 years, and calmly set her leather briefcase down. She looked directly at her terrified brother, her piercing eyes utterly devoid of any familial warmth. I am officially here to formally assume operational control of my company, Cameron, Harper stated firmly, her clear voice ringing powerfully through the silent room. Gregory gasped audibly, his hands trembling violently. You are Apex Holdings? You predatory monster? You systematically engineered this entire hostile takeover? I clearly offered you a generous lifeline 9 months ago, Dad, Harper replied coldly, slowly opening her briefcase and extracting a sleek silver pen. I practically begged you to let me fix the systemic rot destroying this business. I offered you $750,000 and my complete strategic expertise. And what exactly did you do? You laughed directly in my face. You shredded my proposal on your dinner plate. You arrogantly told me to leave because I wasn't adequately committed to the family legacy. So you decided to ruthlessly bankrupt us? Cameron screamed, completely losing his mind, pointing a shaking finger directly at her. You intentionally tricked us into a predatory loan just to viciously steal everything we built? I didn't brutally bankrupt you, Cam, Harper said, her tone absolutely unwavering and heavily laced with cold facts. Your sheer incompetence bankrupted this company. Your absolute refusal to adapt to modern logistics bankrupted this company. Buying 12 vanity trucks when you desperately needed automated routing software bankrupted this company. I merely provided the necessary rope. You eagerly tied the noose and jumped. I didn't steal Hayes Global. I legally bought it for $5.2 million because you were completely desperate enough to sell your absolute soul to an anonymous holding company. Gregory slumped heavily back in his chair, suddenly looking 20 years older. Harper, please. You are my daughter. You cannot legally do this to your own family. Blood is blood, Dad, but equity is legally binding, Harper stated, tapping the heavy contract with her manicured fingernail. This business requires ruthless, calculated precision, not blind, foolish nepotism. Now, let's quickly discuss the immediate corporate transition. Cameron, your employment is formally terminated, effective immediately. Due to the strict terms of the takeover clause, you are legally entitled to exactly 0 severance. Security will physically escort you to your office to pack your personal belongings. You have exactly 30 minutes before your keycard is permanently deactivated. Cameron looked exactly like he was going to violently vomit. He looked desperately at his father for backup, but Gregory was completely broken, staring emptily at the polished table. As for you, Dad, Harper continued, her voice softening slightly, just a microscopic fraction. You are being forcefully retired. You will retain a nominal 5% non-voting share, and your executive pension will be fully legally secured. You will never have to worry about money. But you will never, ever step foot in this corporate building again. You no longer have any strategic power. You are a cold, heartless bitch, Cameron spat viciously, angry tears aggressively welling in his eyes as the two large security guards slowly moved behind his chair. No, Cameron, Harper replied smoothly, sitting down gracefully in the large CEO chair and comfortably crossing her legs. I am a highly successful private equity investor, and I just successfully saved our grandfather's legacy from your absolute stupidity. Now, please kindly get out of my boardroom. I have an $80 million logistical empire to aggressively restructure. The room was incredibly quiet as Cameron was forcefully escorted out, leaving Gregory staring at his triumphant daughter. Harper didn't gloat. She simply pulled open her laptop, fully ready to begin the hard work of rebuilding the empire she rightfully owned. If there's one thing to take away from this family feud, it's that respect isn't given. It's aggressively acquired. Did Harper cross a line? Or did she give her father and brother exactly what they deserved? Let me know whose side you're on in the comments below. If you want more crazy real-life corporate drama and revenge stories, smash that like button, share this with your friends, and hit subscribe so you never miss an update.